We're with Bill Daley this morning. Bill, obviously lots of conversation about these Trump rallies over the weekend. Your thoughts on the 2016 race?
Well, first of all, tomorrow is unbelievably important because you have this continuing winnowing down of the candidates against Trump. Trump's been averaging somewhere around 30, high 30s. So you're talking sometimes 60 to 70% of the Republican voters are against him. So what happens tomorrow if one of the candidates leaves, if Rubio leaves Florida, it's hard to imagine him continuing. So you're then down to 3 candidates. And the fewer numbers there are, the harder it's going to be for Trump to continue to win, at least make the case that he's a strong candidate, especially in a general election, when he's had very little ability to pull people over, not only from other Republicans, but surely from the different electorate that comes out in a general election.
But he's in the 40s in Florida right now.
Well, that's full 44. He won't end up at, I'll bet you whatever you want to bet that he won't be 44.
Guys, this is a really important point that Bill is raising, and that is the fact that, yes, Donald Trump is in the lead on the GOP side. But when you look at the broad population of the country, it's 35% favoring Donald Trump, 65% saying we don't want Donald Trump.
Of Republican voters,
yeah.
which is about 27–30% of the American people that self-identify as Republicans.
That's a high floor, low ceiling thing. So let me just play Trump for a second. He'll say that once those guys get eliminated, he'll be able to gravitate more independents, more Democrats, more blue-collar Democrats to his side, as well as Republicans. You don't believe that?
In the polling, there's been no evidence of that, his ability to reach out for that. If you're talking about the sort of old Reagan Democrat sort of thing, he's got them all right now. You're talking about a very different America than when Ronald Reagan ran as far as the electorate is concerned. You're talking about a young America that is not going to go for Donald Trump, in my opinion. You've got Hispanics, as was talked about earlier in the show, that have a very hard time with Donald Trump.
You've got blue-collar union guys, though, in the Rust Belt. Look at what he did in Michigan.
Yeah, and unions are 7% of the American workforce today. So it's not like 1980 with Ronald Reagan getting unions and Reagan Democrats. It's a very different electorate.
Well, unions also evangelicals.
Looking beyond these primaries and the election itself to the next presidency, you were there as the chief of staff. How hard is it going to be for the next president, whether it's Trump or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, to actually govern Washington in this country in an environment where obviously there are a lot of very angry people? How hard is this next job?
Extremely hard. It's been difficult for the last 8 years to get anything done in Congress that seems to have been gridlocked and deadlocked. So I think when we look to the election, if we don't look to people who can maybe address that, we've got serious issues here with the economy, foreign policy, military, terrorism. And unless there is some coming together, not dividing us, it's going to be extremely important. You talked about earlier the chance of getting tax reform. If you want a change in the economy, it has to be based upon some economic plan that at the heart of it is an improvement in our tax structure.
Do you see anybody out there who is capable of creating this coming together?
I'm a Democrat, obviously. I think Hillary could do that.
Right, but look how, but she's just as polarizing, perhaps more polarizing than anyone on the Republican side.
But she knows how to work. Bernie, no doubt about it.
He's pushing her to the left.
He's pushing her to the left, no doubt about it, is where she started. But I think watching her, knowing her for over the years, she knows that the success of a presidency is getting something done, not just getting the office. And I've watched her, and I think she could do that.
Her tax plan complicates the tax code in terms of the holding period for capital gains, for preferential capital gains.
Why is she doing that?
We have a minimum tax for people making $2 million. We got a surcharge on people making more than $5 million. We're going to change the.
Let me remind you, when Ronald Reagan put out his tax plan in December of '84. What ended up passing Congress 2.5 years later was very different than what he put out. Very different. So my sense is that whatever their tax plan is, and Cruz is running around, I think it's not just the ideas. It's this has to be dealt with, the tax code, to help the economy. And I think it's going to happen.
President Obama hasn't been able to work with Republicans in Congress. How would Hillary manage things differently? What would be different in her approach that we haven't seen in President Obama?
Well, first of all, I think she obviously comes to this office, if she wins, with a greater experience and more period in Washington, having dealt and built relationships. So I was there under President Clinton as Commerce Secretary, a divided Congress. And he and Mrs. Clinton, who was there, obviously, saw the value of trying to work together.
But they're very different, Bill and Hillary.
Times are different.
And they're very different.
President Obama has done on that front?
Well, I would hope, it takes two to tango, I would hope after this Republican election, if a Democrat wins again, at some point the Republican Party's got to say, maybe this didn't work for the last 8 years, being obstructionist. Maybe it didn't work just saying no. Maybe we've got to get something done and not be beholden. And I was there when we tried to do a debt deal with John Boehner, and basically the new members of Congress, the Tea Party candidates elected in 10, said no way, no how. Ain't going to happen.
But how many times have you heard Obama say no way, no how?
But if you're talking about the last 8 years and the next 4 years, that's the big difference. I think no matter who gets elected, things will be different.
You're going to go work in a Democratic administration, Bill?
I doubt it. I doubt it. No, I don't think so. I think I've done that, been there, done that.
How about a Trump administration, Bill Daley?
It's not going to happen, so I'm not going to have to worry about it. And I don't need an apartment, so I don't need Donald Trump.
Yeah, underestimate Mr. Trump, and you see what's happened to the Republican candidates.
Yeah, but again, this is a small sliver of the electorate. And the electorate that shows up in the general election, and you can go through history, it is a very different electorate. Very, very large, very diverse, very different.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points.
Cook County, those sorts of
No,
people.
I'm talking about live people who don't pay attention to this game until the fall.
Yeah, and a lot of people beginning to pay attention right now. Actually, the voter count has been unbelievable. The people coming out to vote in some of these states. Certainly the GOP
compared
side.
to 4 years ago or 8 years ago.
Bill, good to have you. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Bill Daley
Thank
there.
you.